Hey y'all, it's Christy Cook from Teadoddles, and today we are going to discuss the difference in hand-dyed indie yarns and store-bought yarns. Okay, so first I'd like to say welcome new subscribers, welcome back subscribers. I'm happy to have you here with me in my maker shenanigans. I do like to do the sewing things, the yarny things, and the DIY things, so you'll see a little bit of all of that here. I do consider this a maker channel, so if you like to make things, you might like it here. Alright, y'all. I had someone ask me in the comments once before if I would do kind of a comparison between hand-dyed indie yarn and store-bought yarn. They had never tried the hand-dyed before, and it can be a bit pricier than the store-bought yarn, so they just wanted to know what was so great about it compared to the stuff that you can get in the store that may be cheaper. Okay, so I have several yarns I pulled out just to kind of go over some things. First of all, the yarn you buy in the store, if you shop at Walmart, you're likely, it may not be Red Heart with the Love, but you've probably come across Red Heart. That's a pretty standard yarn that you see in Walmart and big what do they call those, chain stores like that. It's pretty typical. This yarn is acrylic, number one, so that's going to be your biggest difference between hand-dyed yarns and yarn you buy in the big box stores. Most of the cheaper yarns are acrylic, which is a man-made fiber. Hand-dyed yarns are on animal fibers, either wool. Usually most of them have a sock yarn, which is a wool and nylon blend. Okay, but it's mostly wool. You will see some other fibers in there. Alpaca is a good one. There's also sorts of Angora. I'm going to show you some examples of different fibers I have here. But in the store, when you buy these kind of things, this is generally acrylic. Now there are acrylics range from this. The Red Heart with Love to me is softer than the regular basic Red Heart. To me, that yarn is very scratchy. It can be good for certain things, and some people say it softens up when you wash it. It just depends on what you're going to use it for. But if I use Red Heart, I tend to like the With Love because it's softer to me. Okay, plus you get these bigger skeins on websites and stuff. Another thing is this is, yeah. So I don't know exactly the price of this. I'm gonna look them up and put them down below. Some of the prices I can tell you, some of them I can't remember. But so this is a very basic yarn that most people are familiar with, is Red Heart. Okay, and you can get it in ombres, and you can get it in varying tones and things which can mimic hand-dyed yarn. Okay, the only difference is that that is a controlled dyeing process, so that the things look very much the same each time they make it. Okay, it's more controlled. We'll get into that in a minute. But some other ones you may be familiar with is like the Premier Everyday Anti-Peeling. This yarn is a higher end acrylic yarn. It has it's supposed to prevent from peeling. It tends to be softer and more durable than the standard basic acrylic. And both of those are number 4 weight. Now you can get acrylic in other weights. This is actually a worsted weight as well. This is a Brava from Knit Picks. This is another 100% acrylic, but it says premium acrylic. Generally, when you see premium acrylic on there, that means that it's a higher quality acrylic, and it can be a little pricier. So this is very squishy yarn, and then they also have it in sport weight, which sport weight is actually a number 2 yarn, and this is a number 4, and there's one in between that's DK, which is a number 3. So now when we get to the hand-dyeds, most hand-dyed shops, you're going to see a majority of their yarn is going to be sock yarn and sock weight yarn, which is a number 1. and it's going to be a wool and nylon blend, okay? And that is typical because it takes dye very well. It's very receptive to the different dyes they use and the different colors they want to mix. But I will show you some other fibers that they tend to use, but that is why they like the animal fibers. It just takes dye very well. Acrylic dye is a little more of a process, which is why you see it in the big manufacturers, because it is a plastic technically. Acrylic is a plastic technically. To dye it is a different process than just using hand dyes, okay? But you can find, even in name brand yarns, this is a loops and thread, and this is an acrylic nylon blend sock yarn. It is very soft, so if you have an allergy to wool, this is a great option if you want to knit socks or you want to use sock yarn. Now this is a very plain color. You will find hand dyed yarns typically have a color palette to them or an ombre effect. They do come in solids though. It just depends on the dyer. So yeah, this is but you will, let's see, this has 678 yards on it, okay? So number one yarn, considered a sock yarn, but it is acrylic nylon blend. It is very soft. So now this is another name brand. This is a Mary Maxim Step Soft sock yarn. This has a pattern to the yarn, but it is I believe this has got wool in it. Yes, this has the superwash wool. It is 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon, okay? Typically you will see superwash wool a lot in sock yarn because it's more durable. Now I'm gonna say this right here does not feel as soft as the hand dyed yarn to me. It's not as squishy, it's not as soft. And something I've noticed is a number one in these types of yarn, this is almost a lace weight in my opinion for this Mary Maxim stuff. It's very thin for number one, as well as this is fairly thin as well. You see, these are on the lighter end of a number one, and the reason I bring that to light is I'm going to compare it to the sock yarn from a hand dyer. It's just different. But first I wanted to say that there are some options that mimic hand dyed better and have the wool in it within name brand that don't cost as much. They are going to be more than the acrylics, because acrylic, like I said, is cheaper. It's made of a plastic. It's something they can reproduce. Whereas wool kind of has to be harvested. I know that sounds weird, but that's what they do with wool. It's not something that's just can be reproduced whenever you want, if that makes sense. So this is called Spun Colors. It's from Premier as well. I thought it was a great comparison to some hand dyed yarns. It has great coloring within it. It is also a wool blend yarn. So now it is still 65% acrylic, but it does have 35% fine superwash merino in it, okay? There's 419 yards in this cake. Now this cake, I'm not completely sure, but I think it's about $10 probably, somewhere in that range. These cakes tend to run that price, okay? But it is a nice comparison to a hand dyed. The only thing is, these are going to look pretty much the same every time you get it, right? It's produced in a manufacturing plant, right? It's reproduced. There's a process they use to make it the same as much as they can, right? You do see dye lots on yarns where they dye the whole lot, and it can be a big dye lot. Whereas hand dyed yarn is typically a very small dye lot. Most indie dyers have recipes for their dyes that they can repeat. But because they do a hand dyeing process, there's always things that can affect that, right? There's always things that can change it, just like with big manufacturing. That's why they tell you to buy yarn from the same dye lot, because it can be slightly different depending on just different things that are you can only control to a certain extent. Okay, so now we're going to look at some hand dyed yarns that are, these are from Knit Picks, and I showed these in my blog this week, but these are going to be slightly cheaper than the indie hand dyed yarns. Now these are still, I'm not going to say they're hand dyed necessarily. Let me open this little paper. Well, it doesn't have anything in there. They have a process, but it is very much like hand dyed. Okay, there are, even Line Brand carries a line of hand dyed. I put quotations around it because it's still done in a high quantity process, so it has to be, it's just different than an individual doing it. Okay, so that's kind of like Knit Picks. So this is a fingering weight, which is sock weight yarn. It's not going to focus on it, is it? And this is actually 80% superwash fine Highland wool. So that is a higher quality wool. And 20% polyamide, which is similar to a nylon. Okay? So you can see, if we take a peek at this, what do I already have on there? Let's look at this side. You can see the twist on this yarn, very much so, compared to this sock yarn. They're both sock yarns. Now you can see the twist on this, but it's not as predominant as this other sock yarn. This hand dyed yarn tends to be squishier than this, especially if it's an acrylic blend, because this twist is done, like I said, in a manufacturing plant. Plus the acrylic just does different than something that is mostly wool. So what you can see is you get a beautiful palette of yarns with this, and it's like I said, if you're looking to try hand dyed, this is an option that won't be as much as the indie hand dyers over at Knit Picks or We Crochet. That's actually where I got this from. They're a sister site. And this one is another one, and this one is actually, this is called hand painted, and this one's 100% superwash merino. It is a heavy worsted weight, so they do come in different weights with the hand dyed. There's just so much more character and tonal quality to an indie hand dyed yarn, or even if you go to like We Crochet and you get these types of hand dyed yarns. Okay, they're just a bigger company than an individual indie hand dyer is going to be. That's just all there is to it. You can see when I compared them, there's just a difference in the yarn itself. It's just the only thing I can say is that these are just squishier. They're squishier because they don't have that acrylic in it. They do have the nylon in it, where this one doesn't have any nylon in it. It's all wool, and it's just so squishy. These tend to be softer than any wools I've found in the store. Now this right here has wool in it, but it's mostly acrylic, and it is very soft. Okay, so that's an option, and they have a sample set. I'll put a link to it down below for you can sample things. If you're not wanting to invest a huge amount of money right now and you want to try something. Now, something to be aware of, you'll notice these other ones I showed you were in a cake or a skein. Hand dyed yarn comes in a hank. Okay, you will have to have a way to wind this into a ball or a cake. You cannot crochet or knit off of this hank. Trust me, I know this. A long time ago, I bought some yarn. It was actually a lace weight silk type, no, it was a baby alpaca yarn. Because I got a really great deal on it somewhere, and it was a gorgeous orangey rusty color, and I had never had a hank of yarn before. I had always bought it at Walmart, Hobby Lobby, Joann's, Michael's, you know, those kind of things. So I was like, okay, how do you use this? You know, I tried to crochet from it. It made a big mess, and I got in a knot. Not a good idea. So you have to untwist these if you've never had a hank of yarn before. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. So they're typically, they have an end tucked in here, and you just open that up, right? And it's tied in different places along the yarn. So you have this big loop of yarn. There is an end in there. It's generally tied to one of these little ties along here, okay? And you just snip it, and you'll find the end. And I actually have a swift, which you can put it on. It kind of looks like an umbrella without a fabric on it to me. That's what it reminds me of. And you put this around it. You can adjust it to make it tight. And then I have a ball winder where I wind it up, okay? You can also, I've seen people put this on the back of the chair, or have someone hold it while they wind it into a ball. You know, there are ways to do it without those items, but I highly suggest, because when I got my Swift and my ball winder, I will never go back to doing it in a different way, because it just works really great for me. So, this, you can twist this back up. It's just twisted like this. I can never get them right when I do these. But basically you do that, and it kind of folds in on itself, and you loop it back up, which I totally did not do that tight enough. But I'll get that back off camera. So that is something to know about indie dyed yarns. If you've never tried yarns like that, it will always come in a hank. Now, there are some yarn shops that offer a ball winding service, which is an extra fee. So that's something to think about too. Now, all the yarn I currently have from an indie, no, that's not true. I have yarn from all kinds of indie dyers because I enjoy it. I enjoy trying new shops and supporting small businesses. That is my number one reason for buying indie dyed yarn. You're supporting a small business. And that's very important. Small businesses are very important to the economy overall. You are supporting an individual. I know for myself, owning a small business, I put my heart and soul into it. And you can tell that in this yarn, okay? So you are buying a piece of art, is the way I look at it. Yes, you're gonna make a product out of it, but it's like a work of art. It is a very individual thing. It's kind of like my bags because I only make so many in a print, but I don't mass produce it, so you're getting kind of one of a kind things, okay? Which is why you're paying extra money for it, okay? Number one, it's a small business. Number two, it's a one of a kind type of yarn, okay? So the ones I have in front of me are from my favorite yarn shop, Southern Skeins, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Her prices on her, this is her Southern sock base. This is her main base. And a lot of yarn shops have different bases that they dye. And sometimes I have a colorway and a bunch of different bases. It depends on how big the indie dyer is. Because there are some indie dyers out there who are bigger and have a bigger, they have employees that actually work with them. So they have more options, right? This runs $15 in her shop, okay? Which is a great, excellent price for hand-dyed indie yarn, sock yarn. Most of them are $26. That's what I've seen. That's the average price for a skein of sock yarn, hand-dyed sock yarn. But as you can see, this is just gorgeous. I mean, look at it. Look at how beautiful the color is in it. So fabulous. There is 430 yards on here, like I said, and this is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon blend, okay? And this is fairly typical for what you're going to find in most indie shops is sock yarn with the variants in the blend that I just told you, and it's going to be over 400 yards of sock yarn, because I do believe you're supposed to be able to knit a pair of socks out of this is the purpose. You can crochet it too. Just so you know, you can crochet with this. I have crocheted with this type of yarn. It is not just for knitters. I lost my train of thought. Give me just a second. So like I said, Southern Skeins, her Southern sock base, $15. Plus she has free shipping in her shop. I will put a link down below. I have many other yarns. A lot of this wound up over here. I have a bin full of yarns from people. I love hand-dyed yarn, and I will buy it. Sometimes I just buy one skein to use for something, and I'll mix it with other things, as you've seen me doing some of my shawls. And so a lot of them have yarn clubs that you can join. Southern Skein has a sock club and a not sock club yarn club to join. I actually have a coupon code you can use down below to get 20% off your first purchase from her or your first sock club. It does not work on her advent calendar though, just so you know. If you want to give it a try, you can get a discount as well. But like I said, this is the main thing you'll see in most indie dyers shops, is this kind of yarn. Average price that I've seen is $26 a skein for it. $15 in Southern Skein's shop. So just something to think about. Now, I have some other of her yarns in different bases because I am a member of her not sock club. I was a member of her sock club for a long time. So this is a 100% baby alpaca. This is a sport weight, so it only has 220 yards on it. Y'all, if you've never had baby alpaca before, it's something you need to get a skein of this at some point in your yarny career. It is so soft. There's nothing I've worked with that quite compares to baby alpaca. It's just the softest yarn. It makes the softest yarn for an animal fiber. So you can get sport weights. A lot of them have sport weights, which is a number 2 yarn. I think this is also, no, this is a DK weight, and you can see the twist a little more pronounced in this one, and it's got to do with the fiber blend. DK weight is a number 3. This one's actually 50% merino and 50% bamboo. So sometimes you can find fun fiber blends like that in shops. I believe her sock clubs are $25 a month, and that includes shipping. I think that's correct. And this one has 262 yards. So usually, most of these are always going to be 100 grams, and the yardage can vary depending on where they sourced their fiber from. Okay. Yeah. So that's a DK weight. Now I have. This is DK as well, but it's just a different colorway if you wanted to check that out. And this one, and it's because this one is actually the merino and nylon blend, like a sock yarn. It's just a DK weight, so that's why you don't see the twist as much in it. It's not as pronounced, right? And then I have this set of minis from her. It's a tweed base. Oh, I love a tweed base yarn. This is actually 85% superwash merino and 15% nep, which is the little bits you see in there. So this is a mini skein set, okay? Now a lot of shops sell mini skeins, just a mini skein. It's just a little, it's like 20 grams of yarn at 46 yards for this one in particular, but this is a DK mini. So you can find mini skeins in a lot of shops, and sometimes that's a great way to try their yarn. I do suggest buying a mini skein set or something so you can actually make a hat or a scarf or something with it. So yeah, that is a great way to try out yarn and not spend as much when you're looking at yarn. But like I said, I would suggest starting with Southern Skeins because it's $15 for her Southern sock when she has it in stock. It sells out quick, y'all. So that is my basic review of the difference between indie yarns and store-bought yarns. Store-bought yarns, of course, are produced in mass quantities. They're produced by chain stores. They are typically acrylic. You can find some wool blends in there occasionally. They're still going to be slightly more than what you usually see in the store. Not as much as hand-dyed yarns typically are. But it's just the same yarn that everybody else is going to have. Let's put it that way. That's what it's going to, even when they do their hand dyed yarns, they control it to an extent because they want it to look the same all the time. And indie dyers do have methods they use to control it, but they will tell you this is hand dyed yarn, so there are going to be slight differences in each skein, which I think makes it even more interesting, personally. So indie dyed yarns, you're supporting a small business. You are getting a one-of-kind product. You are 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an animal fiber in there. So it's a higher quality yarn anyway than just acrylic. I don't think I've seen any hand-dyed indie dyers use acrylic, but I could be wrong. I haven't come across one. Let's just put it that way. And it's just a fun yarn to work with. It's going to be quite different than working with an acrylic. Wool yarns have such great stitch definition. That's something I noticed immediately when I first started buying yarns like this. The stitch definition with crochet or knit is just so much better with a wool yarn. I notice it more in crochet because knit tends to only have 2 stitches. I mean, there's other things you could do to those stitches to manipulate them, you know, to make lace, and just there's things you can do. I don't know, from what I know about knitting, they're all variations of the knit and purl. Crochet has so many different variations of the stitches, and so many different stitches. The stitch definition with a hand-dyed yarn it's wool based, is just awesome. Okay, and something to know: when you get wool, you will hand wash it, of course. Even though superwash wool is supposed to be washing machine friendly, I always hand wash. You let it soak, you let it dry, it blooms, it gets slightly bigger, it gets super drapey. It's just a wonderful product. And I just love the colors in hand-dyed yarn. It's just gorgeous. There's, of course, some gorgeous yarns you can buy in the store, which is why I have so much of both. But if you haven't tried hand-dyed yarn, I say give it a go. I think you will enjoy it, especially if you love yarn. And I highly recommend trying Southern Skeins because she has such great prices, and then you can move on from there. I certainly buy yarn from lots of different places. I have the Lolo Did It tweed based yarn coming in once a month for that club I joined. I did last year, was it last year? Where I tried out all the different clubs for different indie dyers on Etsy. So I've tried a bunch of different yarn, and there's still some out there that I want to try. There's always more yarn to try, y'all. But that is my opinion and what I know about the difference between hand-dyed yarn and store-bought yarn. I would love to hear what y'all think about it down below. If you know something that I don't know, please tell me down below. I'm always willing to learn. But that's going to be it for this video. I hope y'all enjoyed it. And y'all remember to have a life lived creatively, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye.